Hey everybody, welcome back to my Eurovision React Review channel. So first and foremostly, I just want to apologise for the quality of this video. I don't have any of my recording equipment with me. If you follow me on Instagram, you will know that currently I'm on a few weeks holiday in and around Europe. So I'm literally just in my Airbnb with my Mac. But fundamentally, it seemed appropriate to record this video because we now officially know that the UK will be hosting Eurovision 2023. The EBU and the BBC and a multitude of official avenues have now confirmed this is the case. So I haven't kind of talked about this on my channel as of yet because we didn't know. Like, we knew that the EBU were in discussions with the BBC, but nothing was generally confirmed. And like a lot of people, particularly on Instagram, were asking me, you know, which city would you like to host? And I was like, oh, it's not yet official. And moreover, it's still, we've got to remind ourselves why we're in this position, why the UK will be hosting it, and that is obviously what's happening on the ground in Ukraine. So it's going to be hosted in the UK, and I quite like the fact that the official press statement said on behalf of the winning broadcaster, Ukraine's UA-PBC, is that their acronym? And so we know that the Ukrainian broadcaster will work alongside the BBC to produce Eurovision 2023, and everything that's been stated by the BBC and the EBU has been very careful to make it very clear that the BBC will be hosting it on behalf of Ukraine. So as a result of that, we know in Eurovision 2023 there's going to be hopefully a significant Ukrainian element to the whole show, whether that be presenters, acts, postcards. They've even said the logo will be out soon, which will show the kind of solidarity between the UK and Ukraine in regards to Eurovision 2023. Now, first and foremostly, as a Brit, I just want to say how unbelievably proud and honoured I am as a Brit to be able to host Eurovision. Now, I keep saying this to people the last few days, and I keep saying it in my videos, you've got to realise that, yes, obviously over the years we've sent some pretty dodgy acts, but fundamentally there is a Eurovision culture in the UK, and something that I will get onto in a second doesn't exist in other countries like Italy. So, for it to be, honestly, even my nan messaged me being like, have you heard we're hosting Eurovision? So many messages from the UK. And it wasn't being like, oh, it was generally, so I think a general honour. We are genuinely honoured about it, because however much, a general Brit who doesn't follow Eurovision might make a mockery of it, they understand it is a respectable worldwide event, and to host it is a big thing. So I want to make that very clear. Second of all, something that I was reflecting on last night was it also adds more kind of credit to Sam's performance and Sam's placing. I wasn't sure initially whether the EBU and BBC's discussions were based on the fact that we came second. But based on everything that I'm trying to find, I think that is the case, that the EBU then went to the UK because we came second. So it really does solidify Sam Ryder's performance and the UK's placing this year, because I think a few people were a bit worried that at the moment it feels historic, but a few years down the line it might be something that we kind of forget. But I don't think we're going to be able to forget, because Eurovision 2023 will be held in the United Kingdom. So as a result of that, Sam's performance and Sam's placing will be in the history books somewhere. So that gives me kind of a lot of comfort. Basically, I'm not going to talk about, which I'm sure a multitude of Eurovision YouTubers or people who vlog, blog, or have websites about Eurovision will do. I'm not going to talk about kind of which city I hope hosts Eurovision, because I think ultimately it's going to come from a place of bias. Out of all of the cities that have obviously shown interest, a lot of them I haven't visited. I'm going to be honest. Even though I'm quite well travelled, I'm not as well travelled in the UK. I've never been to Scotland. It is a shameful thing that I will rectify very soon. So I'm sure, and I've heard amazing things about Glasgow, and I'm sure Glasgow Glasgow will put on a fantastic event, and they seem to be odds-on favourite right now. But there's nothing really I can say about that because I've not been. I mean, I can tell you loads of reasons why I think maybe Birmingham should host it, because that's where I did my degree and my master's and spent like 5 years. I could obviously tell you why London should host it. I lived there for 8 or 9 years. I could tell you all the reasons why I think Cardiff could host it, because I've got friends in Cardiff, been there so many times, and in my opinion, host the best Pride that I've been to. I could tell you why Bristol could host it, because I'm actually from the southwest of England. But fundamentally, that's not really going to add any value, I don't think. I was going to do a video of all the reasons why I think Birmingham should host it. I think out of all of those, for again, biased reasons, because I know that it would do a fantastic job with the infrastructure and everything like that. But I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to talk about my experience from TURIN, and from that experience tell you what I hope the UK and the host city does differently. Because this video isn't about bashing TURIN and Italy's hosting efforts this year, because a lot of people did that, and a lot of it came from people that weren't on the ground. And you know, if you really want to incite a Eurovision fan and get them angry, just say TURIN and they're like, brr. But I live in Italy, I'm from Italy, so I think also as a result of that, I'm not going to do that. That seems like easy pickings. I will be honest, from my experience being in TURIN on the ground, I don't think TURIN is going to go down in Eurovision folklore as an amazing hosting city. Like, I've got friends that have been every year, and I think the general consensus is, in recent memory, Stockholm 2016 is a difficult hosting city to beat. Everyone seems to light up when they talk about that. No one kind of was lighting up around TURIN, and since TURIN, no one's really kind of lit up about it. Now, like I said, I'm not going to bash TURIN. What I'm going to do is I'm going to objectively say that I think the issue with TURIN was there was a huge dilemma with expectations. So what I wanted from my Eurovision experience and what TURIN delivered, because they generally did try, but I think what I wanted was not what they gave me. Because it was my first ever Eurovision. I'd never been to Eurovision before. So I think initially when Italy won and we knew Italy was going to host, I think there was general excitement. I think people were quite excited to go to a fairly warm climate in May with, you know, great culture, great food, and actually geographically located, like, in where it is, it's easy to get to. Like, obviously, you know, it's been held in Baku, and I'm sure for a lot of people, maybe over in the UK, they ruled it out straight away, being like, it's too far. But you can get to Italy from a multitude of participating countries. Yeah, I think there was some initial excitement about it. Let's just say there are a few things that were out of Italy's control. Number one, I said time and time again, particularly when it comes to expectations, my expectations, Italy doesn't have the same kind of Eurovision culture that other countries do, like Sweden, and hopefully like the UK. Like, it is very much San Remo here, and San Remo itself isn't kind of glitter, rainbows, unicorns. It is a very kind of respectable music, festival, effectively. And Eurovision is no more than simply, I guess, a cultural afterthought, an extension of that. So Italy doesn't have that same Eurovision culture or approach to this show as other countries do. That's the first thing. The second thing, it was in a pandemic. They managed to pull off a show during the pandemic, and we know that it was still going on because obviously we had issues and problems with Portugal's delegation where someone tested positive. I've lived in Italy for over 2 years now, and I can tell you, like, we've had some of the, like, strictest restrictions in the EU or anywhere else that I know. But because of that, that did impact and affect, I think, the general feeling as Eurovision fans in regards to how we approach Eurovision 2022. The first and foremost one is how long it took to pick the host city. Like, the UK shouldn't have that issue. They did make it very clear in that press conference that they're going to start imminently to start dwindling them down. And I think, when was it? It took until October for TURIN to be kind of finalised. And I think that really did, I mean, that impacted and affected months of planning. So if we're able to kind of select our host city by kind of August, then we're already ahead of where TURIN was. Number 2, ticket sales. I mean, when did tickets finally come out? It was ridiculous. And again, it was out of Italy's hands. They were obviously having to wait for government guidelines about how many people they could fit in the stadium. But I think we've been confirmed even right now that they're going to come out in November, right? So yeah, let's just kind of say that there are a few things that were out of Italy's hands, and I will give them the benefit of the doubt for those things. So let me kind of go through the things that I learned from TURIN that I want from the host city of Eurovision 2023. First one, it has to be affordable. I'm sorry. The ticket prices for TURIN was extortionate. I actually, in the end, because it was my first ever Eurovision I've ever been to, my job doesn't really allow me to take time off when I want. So I kind of knew this may be the only Eurovision I ever go to. So I kind of bit the bullet and just paid for tickets. And I don't want to know how much I spent over that week. It was something crazy. And that included, obviously, if you follow my channel, the train in from Turin to Milan every day where I work. Yeah, I don't want to know how much I spent. Ticket prices were insane, but I tell you one thing, which living in Italy and trying to fight for Italy's reputation when it came around Eurovision because people were bashing it, is how people in the city took a huge advantage in regards to accommodation. I mean, the amount of people I saw on Twitter when the tickets came out, they were like, well, I'm not going because, or when TURIN was announced as host city, because the accommodation was crazy. Now, I know when events happen, like prices go up, it's supply and demand, right? But speaking to other people who've been to other cities, they said that this was disproportionate to other cities. So I will say, because prices really did rule some people out this year going to TURIN, if you want a cost-effective show, you can rule out right now London, Brighton and Bristol. Because at the end of the day, I think for any true Eurovision host city, it needs to have a spectrum of accommodation, from obviously nice places to your budget. And you're not going to find that in London and Brighton. And from my experience in Bristol, you're not going to find it in Bristol either. So if you want a city that's affordable, then rule those 3 out. There we go. Number 2, oh my gosh, the one thing that started to make sense after TURIN about kind of my disappointment as a Eurovision fan, being in a Eurovision city and kind of feeling that I wasn't in a Eurovision city because I didn't really see it anywhere, was I only realised afterwards the limited to no involvement of OJ. OJ International, the official Eurovision fan group. Now, for a multitude of reasons, I've read that the fact that obviously it did take so long for TURIN to be announced, the fact that it did take so long for tickets to be released, it didn't give them much time to be on the ground and organise places in TURIN. But also, there was no collaboration with the host city in OJ. So I'm going to put the onus on TURIN there, because I can't imagine that OJ International didn't kind of approach TURIN to kind of work out some sort of collaboration so they could put on events. Because we know what OJ kind of gives us. It gives us that kind of thing about Eurovision that we love. They have a set of official DJs that play just Eurovision music. I mean, in the past, they have their own venue, right? Fan Cafe. OJ weren't visible, and I don't think it was their fault. And actually, in the end, there was no, as I said, presence of OJ. And then I remember just a few weeks before TURIN, the OJ website started, basically, they just said, there is a week and there are going to be these events. It was the Eurofans Club. They found a venue out of town, which was really difficult to get to. This isn't slating them, because this was the only thing that I really enjoyed of TURIN. I went to one of those nights, the Balkan night. And it was organised really last minute. It was really far away. But thank God they did, because if they didn't do that, I wouldn't have done anything Eurovision related in that city. So My second thing that I really hope changes with the host city is a collaboration between the host city and OJ, because I think OJ would give me what I wanted from TURIN. Number 3, the opening ceremony. Now, again, like I said, Italy's culture to Eurovision is very different, and it was beautiful. The turquoise carpet event was at that former royal residence, which name escapes me now, that UNESCO heritage site, but it was far. I hadn't landed it was on the Sunday, and I arrived in Turin on the Monday, but I could have gone up for the day, and they were putting on buses for online press, but it was far out, and as a result of that, it wasn't as accessible. But again, it was Italy's approach. Let's show off our culture. And I mean, the images and stills from the event looks amazing. But I'd kind of want the opening ceremony to be more accessible to Eurovision fans. So that's the third thing that I would change. The fourth thing I would change, the Eurovision Village. The location of the Eurovision Village was perfect. It was right in the middle of the city, in a beautiful park, beautiful surroundings, on the River Po. But you go there and oh my goodness, I think the majority of people I spoke to said they went there briefly and then left. Like, it didn't feel like a Eurovision village. So again, I do hope if you take cities like Manchester, Leeds and London, all 3 of those cities hold Eurovision events because there are Eurovision clubs, there are Eurovision organisers. And you would think if you picked one of those cities that they would have a stand, they would have something, and it would feel like Eurovision. Because the Eurovision Village, it felt more like a kind of a world cultural education fair. It just wasn't very good. Number 5, Euro Club. There was no Euro Club. Now, there's no longer an expectation that the host city has to have an exclusive venue, whereby I think before they did. Now, TURIN decided that they were going to have 10 venues and initially, and I was like, sweet. And then I started looking at what was happening at those venues. None of it was Eurovision. There was no Eurovision DJs. There were no past Eurovision acts. It was like college parties or trap nights or trance DJ from Austria. It wasn't Eurovision. Bring back Euro Club. So whatever city hosts Eurovision, bring back Euro Club. Following on from the Eurovision Village and the Euro Club, the next thing is I just hope whatever city hosts Eurovision, that a combination of those things and maybe some other stuff is a meeting spot or a chance for Eurovision fans to meet each other. Like, there were so many of us in Turin, and there were 1 or 2 bars that embraced Eurovision. The Irish bar in particular, the Hunters, I can't remember, it was where I actually watched the final in the end. You could meet Eurovision fans there, but I mean, come on. There should be a multitude of opportunities, events and venues where Eurovision fans can meet. So I'm hoping that is embraced in whatever city hosts Eurovision in 2023. And in all seriousness, carrying on from that, a city that embraces Eurovision. Like, I haven't been to any other Eurovision before, but I have been to international prides. I remember going to Stockholm Pride in 2013 and arriving at the airport, and there were posters for Pride, and there was the LGBTQ flag. It was just Pride, but it was the Stockholm International Airport acknowledging that people are probably arriving, not everyone obviously, but welcome to Stockholm, it's Pride. I'd want that from whatever city. I'd want you to be in that city and know Eurovision is in that city, because there were 1 or 2 signs outside the train station in Turin, but like, that's it. And don't even get me started on bars, cafes and restaurants. You wouldn't know you were in a Eurovision city in Turin. The city, aesthetically and visually, did not embrace Eurovision, but I think they did. I think Turin thought they did, but it wasn't what I expected. I thought it would be like Eurovision had been sick all over the city and you couldn't get away from it. No, you could easily get away from it. In fact, I struggled to find it. So I just want a city that embraces the contest. The last thing I want to say is all of it seems bloody obvious to me, to embrace Eurovision, because at the end of the day, for me, what I thought, and definitely what I think after this, is a host city needs to realise that the fans, in truth, are the real delegations at Eurovision. You know, they are there by choice, and they really do add the real value to Eurovision outside the shows. And fundamentally, if there's anything I learned from those shows that they added in Turin that week, the Eurofans Club, is they sold out in a second. They were really expensive. Eurovision fans will pay. They will pay handsomely to do anything Eurovision-y. So it seems like a no-brainer that there's a lot of money we will happily spend if you put on events for us. So the fact that Turin didn't, the biggest low for me in Turin was I didn't have tickets for the final. I had tickets to the family show. So I did the family show, went and met my friends, had a few drinks, and then walked to the big park that had a stage that was showing it. That was a catastrophe. Google that or go onto Twitter and you'll see images of thousands of people outside, not being allowed in, not being told we're not allowed in. It was a catastrophe. I remember basically turning around to my friends and saying, I don't care if we go back to my Airbnb and watch it on the small TV screen. I cannot move. I feel really claustrophobic and this is a disgrace. No shade on Turin. And what was so disheartening, which made no sense to me, thousands of people turned around, made their way through the city to find somewhere to watch it. There were empty cafes, empty bars with TVs. How hard is it to turn on a TV and say, guys, come in? Like, I remember Chico Toxico, a YouTuber, amazing guy. He was with a group of Spanish people, and I think he went into a cafe and said, can you turn it on? And he did. And they spent that whole night in there drinking. Oh, and obviously that costs money, particularly in Italy. Like, how are you in a Eurovision city? And like, I only knew 2 venues that were playing it throughout the whole city, bars. And these were bars that had already done some nights already, Eurovision related. Eurovision fans had money. They would have thrown money, and it just made no sense to me. So host cities need to realise that you're going to have thousands and thousands of people coming to you that will happily spend money. So make events for us, and bars and cafes, get with it. Just get with it. I'm not a business orientated person in any way, shape or form, but it seemed like a bloody no-brainer. Thousands of people walking through Turin with empty bars and cafes trying to find somewhere to watch it. Like, cha-ching, turn on the TV. Anyway, so those are the things I learned from Turin. I'm sure it will be rectified next year, and I think the reason why it will be rectified is hopefully planning goes along a bit quicker, because hopefully pandemic doesn't play as much of a feature in the planning of this. Hopefully OJ gets back involved, and like I said, the BBC did the 50 years of Eurovision anniversary thing, right? Like, we do understand Eurovision. We've got an idea of Eurovision that might be quite like cheesy, but I think for a lot of Eurovision fans that make their way to the Eurovision city, I don't want to kind of stereotype, but I think they would like that. I do think whatever city has it will give Eurovision fans everything that I wanted from Turin. Because like I said, with my job, I don't think I'm going to be able to go, which is ironic because the UK is now finally hosting it, me being British, and I don't even live in the bloody country anymore. But I've got a good feeling that the UK will give Eurovision fans everything that I wanted from Turin. So yeah. So those are my thoughts. Like I said, I can't tell you kind of which city I prefer because some of them I've not been to, and it's just going to come from a place of bias. At the end of the day, I could give you 10 reasons why I think Birmingham's best. International airports, great venues to host it, It's right in the centre of the country, so it's easily accessible. It's cheap. Honestly, it's cheap. Like, bars and restaurants, cheaper. Bars and restaurants are cheap. And there's so much accommodation from different... anyway. And also, it has a designated gay area. It has HOST Street, which you can utilise in so many different ways for Eurovision. I'm not trying to connect Eurovision with LGBTQI plus stuff, but sometimes there is a connection, and you've got this village, and you can cut it off. They cut it off for Pride, and you can have the Eurovillage in there. There's so many bars and clubs that will happily do Eurovision nights, all in one area, right in the centre of town, near Chinatown. But anyway, I think evidently I've already said it. I think Birmingham would be a great city. But then I've spent, 5 years there in total. 3 years doing my degree, 1 year doing my qualification to do my job, and then 1 year for my master's, 5 years. I love it. So those are my thoughts. Please let me know what you think. Please let me know what you think about the UK hosting Eurovision. Please let me know what you think in regards to which city you would prefer to host it. I will leave it there. I'm going to be doing some videos in the next couple of weeks that link to my European trip tour. So stay tuned to those. And until next time, stay safe.